apologize for the late start. We had about a 15-minute delay here due to GoToMeeting setup issues and getting everybody in. And now I lost my train of thought in terms of where we were starting off. We were going, I think, through the reconciliation proposal and then the development process last time, and I think we left off at the development process about halfway through.
Yeah, we got about halfway through it. So.
Yeah, I think, James, you were walking through that. Should we just start there again?
Well, it's also changed a bit since then. I mean, it's also changed quite a bit since then. Would it be more productive to ask? There's a bunch of concurrent threads going on, and I actually can't keep track of where they all are. I want to make sure that we actually talk out any kind of contentious issues that are in those threads. So should we start with, like, does anybody have anything that they want to bring up that they specifically want to get addressed? If people don't, then we're
suggest the exact same thing.
Like, which contentious issue are you thinking of?
Well, I mean, go ahead. Go ahead, James.
No, I was just going to say there are a number of discussions going on. There's I think 25 open issues in the tracker right now. They don't seem to be particularly contentious as much as they seem to be just kind of a work in progress on a number of items. For example, just over the weekend there was quite a few edits to the stability policy. The stability policy part of the document deals with things like the API changes, pre-release and post-release, as well as things like dependency upgrades and those kinds of things, which have been, somewhat contentious in the past in terms of, how do we keep up with V8 and how quickly do we keep up with V8 changes and other things like NPM and those kinds of things. There's been some disagreement on that in the past. The stability policy in the current document tries to take a good look at that and, how do we deal with those in terms of major, minor version increases. Things like reversions if necessary. The differences between an implicit or explicit API change, those kinds of things. And there's some of those details which may be still up for discussion. I wouldn't necessarily characterize them as controversial, though. So the key question would be, does anyone have any thoughts? Have you had a chance to review what's in the document? And if you have, do you have any thoughts on things that just aren't going to work, or other ideas, or whatever that we have not yet captured? So I guess the question there, would it be helpful to just open the floor for discussion, or should we walk through it, and if discussion points come up, we can pause and talk through it?
I guess I'm a little more of a fan of the former approach. It feels like, people haven't taken the time to read it by now and kind of come up with questions ahead of time, then we shouldn't spend the call. It's everybody's time on that.
Okay. So at this point, I would just say, the document is there. It is being iterated on. There are a number of threads, so I would recommend that everyone go take a look at those and weigh in on the specific points. And with that, we can just open it up, see what are the specific issues that we need to work through on this call. One of the action items from last week was to kind of start thinking about who should be on this reconciliation working group, if that's the direction we wanted to go, and what would be the process for getting that started. So that's one potential thing we can talk about. The second, if there are specific controversial details of the dev policy that people want to raise, we can talk about those. So just like, as Michael suggested, are there specific points that folks want to discuss at this point? I'm going to assume silence means that we're all done. Which is probably not the case.
Well, to be honest, I'm searching for the right document that so I have a visual reconnaissance.
Yeah, I will. Okay, Jeremiah, thank you. Jeremiah just posted the link, and Mike did as well, into the GoToMeeting chat.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeremiah.
I've seen this.
I guess my biggest question would be, what are our, we're in a drafting stage right now. What's the exit criteria? Like, there's a lot of open issues, and a lot of them are kind of around, like, we would like something slightly more specific in this case. And I think that, it's probably good to nail some of those things down, but are they really blocking moving this process forward, or are they things that can be resolved over time, living in document style? So I'd be curious what other people's thoughts are on our exit criteria.
Okay, to lay the groundwork for that discussion, I have been operating on the assumption that pretty much the key exit criteria for this conversation right at this point is general consensus that this is heading in the right direction. If folks just stand up and say, no, this is just absolutely not going to work, then we need to know that now. So we don't necessarily have to have all these details figured out. We can figure them out as we go, iteratively. But as long as everyone thinks this is going in the right direction, then I think we're good. The second would be basically the formation of this convergence working group. So that's going to give us the framework for how do we actually iterate. I don't think we need everybody on this call to get together frequently to work out all of these details. What is the subset of individuals who everyone here trusts to keep moving this forward? Put together the plan for how we're going to bring these two repos back together, and then get everybody's agreement. Once they have that plan, get everybody's agreement to actually start making those steps happen. That's been my assumption.
So, I mean, like, I remember it now. Yeah, I've seen this document, I think, last Wednesday or Thursday. Anyway, it looks good to me. The thing I was sort of curious about, I mean, I'm not saying it should be in this document, but I'm curious about is, do you have like any idea of timeline for sort of when we might end up having like a reconciled master branch or a release or that kind of stuff? Like, are we talking 3 months or like a year or 5 years? Because I think that is, for me, I think we can work out most of the things that we disagree on. There are not so many things actually. But and I think James, we discussed this previously, like one of the things that concerns me is that everything will be really slow.
Right. What if it focusing in terms of timeline? I mean, I'd honestly like to see it happen fairly quickly, but I mean, that's just one point of view. So.
I guess when you say fairly quickly, this is Mike, I'll challenge that for specificity. Are you thinking like 3 months, a year's fairly quick?
I prefer to see it within 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
So it should go a lot quicker than that once we actually decide to do it.
Yep.
Honestly, it's not that hard. I mean, provided that we decide to go about it in the easiest way possible, technically, then it shouldn't actually take that long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I also don't think it should take that long. But so if we think about sort of the future, I think this sort of agreement is that at least Node should have a fast-moving branch, and so, or like something that is definitely more stable than the 0.11 branch was, so people can actually use it and test it, and something that releases frequently enough for people to be interested in contributing. At the same time, I mean, we understand your concerns and know that people like to have an LTS release as well. Now, one of the things I am curious about, like, so my assumption is that currently the LTS release would be sort of Node 0.12. The question is, when will the next sort of long-term stable version be cut? Like, would that be in half a year, or would you want to wait longer? Because a long-term stable branch for only half a year doesn't sound so long-term, right?
Well, okay, so if you
Right,
look at the
and just to give
in the current dev policy, it's agreed that current, whatever the current release is stable but not in LTS yet, and is basically tracking newer versions of dependencies and stuff like that. It's basically what IOJS is doing in terms of the kind of stuff that's in. So that's in the document now. If anybody disagrees with that, I'd like to hear where in the document there's some disagreement about that. And then there's also agreement that we need longer-term support, we need LTS releases, that the LTS working group will figure out what those releases are and what they look like. So they can decide, how long they're going to support O12, NO10, NO8. They can decide, also how long they're going to support IOJS 1.x after a merge release as well, right? And if that, and like whatever metrics that they come up for why they, want to support a particular release for a certain amount of time, like let them do that. Because like I think a lot of the people, especially in the TXC and even on the call, like are more concerned with the current line than the LTS line. And the people that are just concerned about the LTS line should have the freedom to figure that out since they're doing the work.
Right. So the key thing there is that there would be a LTS working group that is chartered that would make decisions largely independent of the main release line, of which ones of those it wants to consider to be an LTS. And that would happen independently of whatever's happening in the master branch. Okay. So until, up until that point where we have a reconciled line where we still have these two parallel tracks, it is entirely possible that there would be LTS releases within those parallel tracks, if that's what the LTS working group wants to do. Once we have the converge line, same thing, the LTS working group decides when those, when a release becomes an LTS release. But there are still releases happening at the same schedule that, the major minor schedule that we have now with IOJS.
Yeah, I guess the one question might be, do we need to define any other stream, or are those enough? Like, there's been some discussion of, say, like a canary stream or something like that, or, is that needed, or is it just have master, which is intended to always be stable, and then the LTSs that cut off at that at appropriate intervals?
I mean, I think canary can be figured out later. I mean, we're not doing it now in IOJS, and at some point we definitely are going to want to test out newer V8s, and figuring out the best way to get people to download and use that and play with it. It's kind of a discussion for another day, like after convergence, right?
I think that makes sense to me, as long as everybody's on the same page that master's stable and yeah.
Now, in terms of the timeline, what I said, 3 to 6 months. One of the things that I would definitely like to see is convergence happen before IOJS rolls over to 2.0. That'll end up pushing us out for a converge line at 3.0.
That's almost certainly not going to happen, right? Because we got a 2.0 coming up probably this week.
Okay. So there we go. So we'd be looking at a 3.0 for the converge line.
At like 3 to 6 months, you could be seeing either the 3.0 or a 4.0, honestly. Mostly because of V8.
I definitely understand that. It's more a statement of I'd rather see it happen sooner than later than at a specific number. I would just rather that number be smaller. So let's do this quickly if we can.
So, okay, so from the IOJS side, in order to get a vote to happen and to figure out if we're joining the foundation and doing the reconciliation, we have to have the dev policy in place. We have to have the TSC charter, we have to have the project lifecycle, and a statement about where all the IOJS working groups would fit in and how they would merge. And we would need the product of this convergence working group that says this is like the strategy for converting the product. project, because a lot of the people in the IOJS community aren't really going to be able to figure out what it means to have a project under these two groups together just with the dev policy. They kind of need to look at how the mergers are going to, where the branches fit in between the different lines. So once we have those documents, which we could probably have, within a week if the convergence working group, like really makes a lot of progress quickly, at that point we can bring it to a vote in IOJS, and what could happen is that we could move the whole IOJS org to the foundation and continue IOJS releases while we're trying to merge and converge in another repository. So basically, io.js would live inside of the new org for the foundation for a little bit while we do the convergence work on the two lines to put them together. Because one of the things that's blocking, like getting a lot of the working groups to merge and put together, are just these like technical details around having like a separate org and having everything in the IOJS org going the way that it is. But we can, there's so many other little pieces to put in place while this merger is happening. Like we have to, there's like a website that needs, like a new website that needs to go up. We need to converge all the build tool chain and all that stuff. Like it's going to be a lot of work, and it's not just going to be in core. So the earlier that we can start doing that, the better. And we can't really block it on waiting for the converged repositories to come together.
So, in terms of timeline, go ahead, Stephen.
I was going to say, it seems like having a version number target for convergence, however that works, would help in having, as we get to having branches that are converging. So it seems like there's kind of a pre-step of having kind of a converged timeline as far as numbering.
Well, that's just not how. The problem is that the way that the IOJS dev policy works now, and in fact, if you look at the new dev policy that we're going to do under this merged product works, is that we don't like target a milestone and a date for a particular version. What we do is that we land stuff on major minor until we have enough pending major changes. And right now we have enough pending major changes. And if in a couple months we still haven't merged yet and we have all these pending major changes, like we're going to want to do another release. So that's where but honestly, like again, I don't think that it's going to take that long to put everything together. Honestly, like the technical work to get everything resolved and merged back together shouldn't take more than a month. I don't see why that would be the case. I'm just struggling to think of what would take so long, and unless we decided for some silly reason to do the merger in the hardest way possible, it shouldn't be that difficult.
Well, Mike Dolan, let me ask you this. What is the current timeline for the board looking at the charter and ratifying the charter for the TSC and the kind of the core documents?
Scott, what do we have, like early May, mid-May to have everything up and running? And then, there'd be a series of things. So, for instance, we'd get the board and the TSC instantiated at the time of the foundation formation in early to mid-May, and then the plan was to, from there, continue, building out sort of the program around it. So, for instance, there's a lot of work to be done, as somebody else mentioned prior, but at least this would give the technical team the infrastructure to go and start doing what they need to do.
Okay. So if we looked at mid-May, Michael Rogers, in terms of the, what needs to happen within the IOJS community to have these things reviewed, if we had the drafts out within maybe 1st of May, would that give you guys enough time to review it and make a decision by the time that the foundation launch in around mid-May?
Yes. Yeah, that'd be long enough.
Okay. And then in the intervening time, we can continue to iterate on the dev policy and kind of figure out what this transition roadmap would be, and put together the plan that, assuming everything goes, everything comes together by around mid-May, we can actually start working on bringing the repositories together, or bringing the organizations together at least, moving all the pieces so we can start the reconciliation. Okay. And then we can look at what the exact timeline from there would be.
So would that have, this is Mike Dolan, just a clarification that would help me. Would that involve like a code freeze or something in that merging process, or?
Probably not. We have two separate we have two separate active lines. There likely would not be a code freeze at all. I couldn't imagine that there would be one. What would end up happening is that each subsequent release in each parallel stream would have to find some way of moving closer together. And that's really what the convergence work group would oversee. Whether that's part of the is reconciling build differences, or if there's major features that need to be reconciled across, those kinds of things. Then we'd have to start looking at those. Just so we can start like stair-stepping in that direction.
Got it.
I don't know if that's necessarily the case. So if you in one of the threads, we're talking about how to best deal with the issues and merging the issues, because that's actually a lot harder than code.
Right.
And one of the kind of favored methods is to literally just start over. So have a fresh repo that new people watch and new people pull into, and we have a really good policy about staying on top of issues, and that's where the new repository is. So if that's the case, then essentially for a little while we'll have 3 active repositories. We'll have io.js, join/node, and foundation/node. And in that repository, we can basically keep branches that are exactly in line with some of the remote branches for both of those different projects. And then we work on the master line and just getting that master line basically in line with where each of those 2 repositories are, right? And we have a place that we can point all the infrastructure at, and like we can. I don't think that it shouldn't take that long. I mean, it's just a series of, you start with one of the masters, then you start porting over everything. But I mean, if we started with io.js and ported over the stuff that's been happening in 013 and talking about that, it wouldn't be that much. I mean, there's not that many changes in that line. If we do it soon.
Yeah. Like I say, there is a definite benefit to moving fairly quickly. So if we looked at having all the documents kind of finished up, or with the acknowledgement that these things can be iterated on over time, but so I'm using finished up loosely, by mid-May, and where we can actually start the concrete steps for reconciliation by mid-May. That gives us a time frame of late June, early July, where we could potentially see a fully reconciled stream.
Yeah, that sounds good, actually. I'm not completely sure about starting over. I guess it would be good. It's unfortunate that so few io.js people that actually do work are here. But it also matters. It matters to them most, I guess.
Well, Jeremiah's here, and Jeremiah's doing a lot of that work. Why don't we let him talk?
That's true. Can I say something else? And one of the things that seems rather obvious is that we should start having joint TC meetings in a technical sense. So that means that if we are going to decide on, are we going to change some API, for example, we do that together with the people that maintain Node, or so we don't diverge more. And I would say we can start that as soon as possible. Even before we even merge the branches, we would want to merge decision making, basically.
I would agree. And recognizing that there are going to be differences between the 2 projects for the short term, and an allowance for that decision making needs to allow for those differences. But at least when it comes to something that is a large change, such as an API change, large dependency change, those kinds of things, it definitely should be a joint decision. I think that it would be very beneficial to have a weekly joint TC call, even if it's short.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, if nothing else, just, I don't know if there is a TC call for Giant Node right now, but, we could invite the IOJS people there as observers and invite the Giant Node TC to IOJS call as observers, and everybody could input in each other's projects. Makes sense.
I don't think that we have time for 2 calls a week, but my understanding is that there aren't weekly join/node calls. There are calls about specific kind of issues that they talk about, like they'll have a call about the roadmap or something like that.
There is a weekly call.
Oh, there is a weekly call? Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Thursday morning.
Anyway, we could just merge the agendas for both projects and do them in the same call.
Yeah, possibly we want to do it on the same day also, because I think Nodes on Thursday, IOJS on Wednesday. So what we could do is, for the time being, is try to find one time slot, and then have some time of like joint meeting, and then maybe if there's specific things temporarily, we can after that like sort of split into groups, something like that. But at least that makes the planning thing a little bit easier, and Rod won't have to get up at 5 a.m. 2 days a week, so he'd probably also be more happy about that.
I will take the to-do to put together a doodle poll on when we can get that arranged, what time slot would work best for both groups, and we'll get that going. Okay. So is there anybody gonna? I'm not sure if everybody's had a chance to weigh in. Anybody just sitting there quietly scratching your head, trying to figure out, why we're talking such nonsense? Is everybody on board, or anybody have any other thoughts?
No, I mean, so for this combined call, I'm going to have to create an issue on IOJS and get people to weigh in and potentially vote on it. But it'll essentially be like, we haven't merged the projects, we're merging these calls so that we don't diverge like dramatically from each other and break each other.
Yeah, no, I'd almost say, like, if it's, if that's good if that works. If that doesn't work, we should just keep in mind the earlier step of having a joint call versus trying to merge them all together. If there's opposition or some complications in doing it, it would still be of value to have a joint conversation on in the short term.
Well, we're having it now, but now we have nothing technical on the agenda, so it, we don't really get to practice and do the actual thing we would do in a foundation. So if for that reason, it would be good, I guess. But I think Michael may have a point in the sense that we don't know if everybody would agree, but I don't really I can't really think of any real issues though. What do you? Something completely different, but it came up earlier. Jeremiah, what do you think about starting fresh or moving one of the repositories over and moving one of them over to the foundation?
Well, I think my opinion on that was voiced in one of the threads that I'm positive on that because, well, it gives us a clean slate for like issues and stuff, which is really the strong point of it. It doesn't really matter where the code lives per se, because it'd be the same on any repo. But I'd rather not have the backlog of giant nodes issues, and I think IOJS's issues don't really necessarily need to be like all ported over.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I guess the other advantage to that is that if there's going to be a period of time where you have the two streams, having the separate repositories for each of them may be easier to deal with.
Yeah. Okay. So from this, I'm taking a couple specific action items. One, we need the joint call schedule, figure something out there. 2, we need to get the dev policy iterated on a few more times, get it into a state where it's stable. By about the same time that the charter and the other foundation documents are being ratified, with a target towards starting the actual steps for reconciliation, or bringing the two threads together by mid-May.
Right, and I guess
go ahead.
I was just going to say is, like, have we identified everything that needs to happen before the IOJS side and the Node side votes could take place, or is there any, is everything that's being, like the dev policy and all that, anything outside of that that needs to be done to be ready for that?
At this point, the biggest thing that I see we need is just everyone's agreement that it's heading in the right direction. All of the technical details we can work out as we go. There's lots of little questions that are going to come up, but as long as we have everybody agreeing that we're heading the right direction, then we can jump on a call and work out what those details are. So, I mean, if the process for editing this dev policy draft has been any indication, folks are more than willing to jump in and pitch in. So that's definitely a good sign.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I agree. I don't know. What can we, like, how can we demonstrate agreement? That's the, that's really what it comes down to. Like, do I a statement in writing?
I mean, I think we.
Is there is there enough there that we agree that we're in agreement, and then how do we say that?
This is
part of it's going to be.
I mean, do we want to take like a formal vote, like, or get the two TCs to vote or something? I don't know who the official deciders here, but we should just get a record of them all saying yes, I agree.
Yeah, I would just think.
So when we do this on the IOJS side, we have to do it publicly. When we do it publicly, there's going to be random ass trolls that show up and some people that have legitimate concerns. So we want to make sure that we address those concerns, that we have answers to these questions ahead of time. And a lot of these came up in the last thread that was started a few weeks ago, and some of those have been resolved. But if we go back to the table and we say, hey, agree to this dev policy, but we don't have something that says this is how we're going to merge the lines together, and it's not clear where the IOJS code shows up, or if it just vanishes into the ether, or if we don't have an answer to how we merge the working groups, and most of the people that participate in IOJS are in the working groups, so they're going to care mostly about that. We need to have answers for those questions before we actually bring it to a vote.
So that's kind of like we got to identify the list of those key things we need to resolve first.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's the TSC charter, the project lifecycle, the dev policy, the convergence plan. That's it as far as I know.
Okay. So, Michael, I think the to do then would be to take a look at those existing documents, and if those do not cover particular concern, then then we need to iterate it and make sure that those get covered in those documents. So, yeah.
I mean, from what I'm hearing here, we have some open issues, but none of those are blockers at this point, and we're probably fine with leaving them kind of on the table unresolved, and with the understanding that we'll resolve them in the TSC later if they come up. So as it stands right now, does anybody have anything in the dev policy that they would actually object to and vote against, right? That's the question. And I mean, we don't have all the IOJS people or even all the Node.js people on here, but we do need to answer that question. And I'll post an issue on IOJS to point people at that document to say, is there anything you object to in the document as it is right now, right? But we're pretty close on the dev policy.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I don't think there will be a lot of pushback on the dev policy, and most of the, if you look at the last thread in which there was some backlash, maybe it was mostly people weighing in and saying, well, all these big corporations are gonna take over the project. That was one concern, and this actually came up at the advisory board last week as well. My suggestion was that basically the foundation constituents would also introduce themselves a little bit, or we find a way to do that. And the other the other sort of scare was very big. Like we don't want to go back to like buy or like a release once every 2 years. So if we can be, and that's also why I brought it up mostly, like if we can be a little bit explicit on the timeline that we envision, and also like on the fact that we want to have a fast moving branch, I think many of those concerns can be easily addressed. So
I think I want to say like the way to counter that kind of FUD is with like concrete things. So if you say like, hey, what do you guys think of reconciliation? That leaves a lot of room for people to like say, sow fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Whereas if you say, hey, we've got this dev policy, does anybody think that there's a clause here that is objectionable and specific? Or hey, we've got this release plan. Does anybody think this is wrong? I think that's kind of the way to kind of clamp down on the general sense of let me sow problematic emotions into the air.
So what it sounds like to me is that we have primarily a communication issue, that we need to make sure that the specific concrete proposal that we're putting on the table is being communicated more than the fear, uncertainty, and doubt messages going out. We can definitely take that as a to-do and just kind of write some things up that say this is how we envision things actually working, right?
Well, I think
dev policy document.
Oh,
good.
Sorry for interrupting you, James. I think I sort of agree with that. We may have a little bit of a communication problem. However, the problem isn't that that the information is not out there, or even that people cannot find it if they care. It's a matter of like who says it. So there's like some people in IOJS that say, well, we would like to reconcile, and there's people like on the Node side of things that are like, yeah, we're working on reconciliation, but we do not manage to make a statement like all of us, basically, where we say, okay, this is something we can all back up. And that's also because there's like a chicken and egg problem. Like we're like, well, we have to ask the community first, and at the same time, the community will probably accept it if most people that actually do the work and that are involved in working groups agree with it. So my suggestion would be that if we do it, we take the foundation umbrella and we say, okay, this is now, this is like after all these weeks, this is what came out of it, and unless there's like very big objections now, we are going to proceed forward with it. And maybe like put my name on it and put some, put your like James's on it or whatever, and claim that we represent these communities. I want to see Michael and TJ listed if we can. So it actually, people can actually see that we sort of work together again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Currently, we don't. So since we don't have a foundation website to put that under yet, and we won't until the foundation actually launches. If we did write something up that said this is the direction we're heading and sign it all, all of our names to it, then that could be posted, on both the Node website and IOJS website. Understanding that there's a lot of process and voting and review that still has to happen in both communities, but we can still sign it saying that this is the direction that we are looking at. What do you guys think? Right? And get several of us to actually put our names to it. And I think that's a great process. Okay.
Okay.
So we only have a few minutes left. Anybody else have any other thoughts? Okay. So
this is Stephen. Just quickly on sort of getting the word out, getting the communicating the message. Maybe we could look at different options, like maybe having a specific call-in or Hangout or IRC or something addressing different questions specifically aimed at saying, hey, are you interested in providing feedback, which is what this meeting is about, of course, but specifically
You're talking about like
saying,
a community?
Yeah, community.
So like anybody can dial in and ask questions, or we take it from the RC channel or something like that.
Right.
So
Like a hangout. Like a hangout on air.
Showing transparency.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Mike. I think I proposed that to somebody, if we could just do like an open Q&A forum and just answer any questions that random people have. Maybe we do it by posting it to the issue trackers. If you look at all the 200 and some comments in some of these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, yeah, I think that's a great idea, actually.
Probably we should coordinate with the advisory board, though. Like, we were thinking about the sort of the same thing last week, and let's keep the explosion of venues down a little bit. And so, but yeah, I that's like a public Q&A sounds like a great idea. I mean, we could also consider like do it on Reddit or something, or something slightly less chaotic than GitHub issues when it gets busy.
Well, like a Reddit AMA. Ask me anything.
Right. So the
sounds really cool.
if we wanted to do something joint, I mean, we can do one Q&A session, which is basically two parts. One that deals with kind of the advisory board foundation level discussion, and another that deals with the actual technical team discussion. Kind of roll it into one.
Yeah, I think at least imagining an Ask Me Anything model, you would just want to have people from both parties on hand to respond to questions, some of which will be directed in one direction, some of which will be directed in the other.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so action item wise, is that something like when would you set that up? Like next week or so? I can send some emails, or maybe there's a couple of people that want to get involved. Like there's.
Do you feel like you're ready to do it? I mean, right now, because basically, like next week, we'd have to be. Or do you think we're done? We had talked earlier. I don't know if we came to full conclusion on what the, quote unquote, publicly visible approval option was going to be, and there was some discussion about the technical committees doing sort of like a public sign off or vote on it. Would this be before we do that or after? I assume before, but I just want to confirm.
I would also think before. Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, so here's so it has to be before, but like if it becomes a formality, it's not super urgent, right? Like we could even do that in 2 weeks. I think like to set up an AMA like in this style, we have to do some planning around it so that people are actually online to answer questions. Maybe find a moderator or something. So I mean, I can't do it tomorrow. You know what I mean? And also, we'd have to announce it, otherwise nobody shows up, of course.
Yeah, that's my concern. Is I just don't know if next week's going to be enough time, but we can try. How do AMAs work with a group? I've done them with a single individual, but would we all need to be like on a call talking to each other about the responses, or?
Well,
like
I imagine that.
Go ahead.
I imagine that there would be basically two options. Like either the public could address a specific person, and then like if someone asks a question, whatever, they could say this is a question for Joyan. I don't know. Or we could have a moderator that basically assigns. We have a back channel or something, and a moderator would assign different questions to different people, or it could also just be a free-for-all, like everybody can answer any questions they want. I don't know what would work, actually. If you have any ideas, please let me know.
Okay. We just did one. We have somebody at the Elf who just did a fairly large one. Let me check with them what the options were, what might be the best way to do that. I can't promise we'll be able to do it next week, though. So Scott Nicholas and I are going to a legal conference, flying out tomorrow. We won't be back till Saturday, so I'm thinking maybe the week after that, if we start to publish a date, that would be...
That'd be okay.
The week of the 27th? Or we could target maybe late next week, like the 23rd. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, one thing we might want to do is... go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to suggest, you know, look, considering everybody's schedules, I mean, let's put together a couple of dates and do the whole doodle poll thing and see what is going to work best for that. I think I know I have some stuff coming up next week that may make it fairly difficult for me to do that. But you know, week after next, the week of the 27th is actually much clearer. Yeah, and you know, and given that we may want to bring in some of the advisory board stuff as folks as well, we may need to give it a bit more time for coordination.
All right, let me check with our team who's done these before, and we'll set up a doodle poll, to try to get the majority of people.
Cool.
And you know, in the meantime, I think it'd also be worthwhile to pursue getting something written up. I can take that to start kind of outlining that. But then kind of need to know who wants to participate with that and get their name on that, and we can work collaboratively through that. I will send out a note to everyone on the copy list. And we'll
James, this is Mike Dolan. I'd be more than happy to help out. I was actually planning on writing something up on the plane tomorrow about more of the foundation governance, the board, and sort of the business aspect of it. I don't know if what you were thinking of starting with, but I was going to go from that approach.
Okay. Well, I think something that covers both aspects, how the foundation works and how the technical stuff works. I was looking at almost a kind of a summary of the dev policy and the TC charter and how things are going to work at a higher level, and then point people to those specific documents for more detail.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be great. So I'll sign up to help on that. I don't know if there's others.
Okay. Well, I'll send a note out probably tomorrow, kind of, to everybody, kind of kicking off that. Okay.
All right. Are we good? Is there anything else?
Anybody have anything else? Okay. So I guess the next thing would be to figure out when the joint TC are going to happen. I have the action item to send out a doodle on that, so I'll take care of that one.
Yes. Oh yeah, looking forward to that. I think by then we will be mostly there. Oh, one final thing. Like, do we have agreement on what the initial TC for the node, for the foundation node would be? Is it like just merging both groups and then, having, what is it, 10, 12 people in there?
I think that's been the working assumption. I haven't heard any objections to that so far.
I mean, it makes sense. It's like it's also the only thing we can sort of credibly do, I guess. Like we can, because of course we can make a list and then say, hey, Colin, you're not on it, but that would be like pretty strange and makes no sense. That makes a lot of sense. I think maybe we should also communicate that then to the community or whatever, whoever wants to know, because right now that's not exactly clear, I guess, to most people. They might just assume that this will happen, but it's not. It doesn't happen.
Right.
We never said as much.
Okay. Yeah, we can make sure that definitely gets included in kind of whatever this write up in the Q&A stuff. Excellent. Okay.
All right. Final call. Anything else?
I think we're done.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for your participation. I do apologize again for starting late and the rough start with the GoTo meeting. We'll get that ironed out for next time.
Thanks, Mike, for setting it up, and talk to you next time. Later.
All right. All right. Bye.